Now, is there anyone else getting on or?
No.
Okay.
Okay, it's setting it up. So, and I have my YouTube on my phone to see if it goes. Okay, I think we're live.
Mm-hmm.
Just need to mute this
Okay,
or I'll
it's
hear myself. Okay, we are on there. Great. Okay, let me bring up my Zoom. Okay. Hi, everyone. So we just wanted to spend a little bit of time with you guys, updating some stuff that we know about PPS and updating a little bit information about Propel. And then also we wanted to offer a watch party with a webinar that I recently viewed. It's called Back to School, but Still at Work, Finding Balance as a Parent. And that was presented by Parent Spring. So I do want to give them credit there. And then we will also share the webinar replay that they shared and their resources that they shared out when we share this on our Facebook page and when I update the information for the YouTube video. But the first thing that I wanted to do, in case you're not familiar with our faces, is just do a quick introduction. So my name is Kiyomi.knox, and I am the Family and Community Outreach Coordinator here at Center of Life. And then Davonne can introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm davonne.fuller, and I'm the Family and Community Engagement Assistant here at Center of Life.
Yeah, so if you're not sure of some of the things that we do here, we do a little bit of everything, Davonne and I do. So if you live in the Hazelwood community, seriously, you can call us or email us about anything it is that you need, and we can try to hook you up with the resources. We've been helping with delivering emergency lunches during the day with our team that are just phenomenal, and they're just superheroes out in the community. We've helped people just get connected with rental assistance. HI has been a really great partner in that. And we've helped people get, different things that they need, like beds or just vacuum cleaners or just other things like that. So whatever it is that you might need, please feel free to give us a call or email. We will post our information on the Facebook post and once I update this YouTube, so that way you can have access to us whenever, but hopefully at appropriate times. So yeah, so the first thing that we wanted to do was just go over the PPS information and how to access that information on their website. What we're finding is a lot of our parents and caregivers, it's very confusing about where to get the information, and it's a little bit of an information overload. So we just want to review that. So I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, and then Davonne, can you confirm that you can see that?
Yes, I can.
Great, okay. So the first thing we want to show you how to do is how to access a lot of the pertinent information that you need right now on the PPS school website. So if you go to pghschools.org/all-in, you're going to find where it talks about device distribution. You're also going to see where they talk about their all-in webinars that they've been hosting. So the first thing I want to show you is the all-in webinars. So these are all of the various webinars that PPS has been hosting over the last week or two. So they've been talking about different things such as supporting the mental health needs of our students, what classrooms are going to look like once they do go back into physical space. But just remember that for the first 9 weeks, PPS is all virtual. Okay, so everything is going to be online. So they also talk about IEPs and 504 plans, out of school time supports, transportation, all of those things. Now, if you missed it, that's okay because they do have them recorded and posted on their website. So if you go back to that page that we originally talked about, that pghschools.org/all-in, down here at the bottom, you'll see that they have this video posted and you can click through the 13 different webinars that they've already recorded and posted. You can also go to this little corner, you can see their Vimeo page. They have all of those things on there as well. So lots of different places that you can view these webinars, especially if you've missed them when they were live. The other thing that we want to talk about is the device distribution. So all of the students should get a device. Now, if you missed your date, don't panic, there are makeup dates. So if we go to the device distribution tab, you'll be able to see when the next upcoming dates are. So the next one is tomorrow and it's 7th grade. And then you can see 2nd and 4th and 6th grade is August 24th on Monday, 9 to 4. Third and fifth grade is Tuesday, August 25th, 9 to 4. Makeup days are 3 days. And so it's going to be Wednesday, August 26th, Thursday, August 27th, Friday, August 28th. They have posted here that it's 9 to 7 p.m. And then we have here, these are some other makeup dates that they have. And then they have some information about SciTech and Kappa. But I do want Davonne to talk just a little bit about some of the things that you'll need to take with you when you go to pick up your child's device. And also keep in mind that the location of the different places that you can pick up your child's device are here. So you'll go to the one that is closest to you.
So some of the things you will need for your pickup. First, only the parent and a guardian can pick up the device for the student. At this time, I don't believe there is any updated information with that. If you have any devices that was handed to you through Pittsburgh Public previously, those will need to be swapped out. So you still want to go to your device pickup distribution date, bring your device, and they'll swap it out for a new one. Also, you will need your ID. The parent or guardian will need their ID, their student number ID number. I'm sorry, and also there will be a technology acceptable use policy that they will have on site for you to sign, so that you can take the device out. But there is also one here, as you can see on the website, that you can download and fill out previously before picking up the device. But if you don't want to do that, they'll have it at site and you can sign it there. But of course, make sure you have your ID, your student's number, school ID number, which that can be found on their report cards. It doesn't have to be a new report card; it can be an old report card. Their student ID number will be on that report card, and of course, you will sign your technology acceptable use policy.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Davonne. So we want to also click over to Propel Hazelwood. And our contact there is Rachel Sonnet, and she's been so great about sharing all of the information that's going on with Propel. So we want to direct you to their website. And then here you can see that they have a coronavirus resource page. So if you go to propelschools.org/coronavirus, #resources, you can go to this resource page where they talk about everything that's kind of going on with the school. They do have a couple different YouTube videos that you can watch where they review some of those different things. They talk about their lessons and what scholar work time's going to be like, and attendance and grab and go meals, all of those things. And then Davonne has a couple little bits of information that we also wanted to share about Propel.
Okay. So Propel School Day, the way they have it set up is the school day will start at 8:30 a.m. with a morning meeting, which is social and emotional learning time in Scholars Homeroom. They will then have a schedule of live classes that will vary by grade. The scholars will receive their schedules at tech pickup this week. The time in front of the computer is spread out throughout the day. Most scholars will be done with class between 2 and 3 p.m. We encourage scholars to attend the live sessions when at all possible, but we understand that they may not be feasible for all families. All live sessions will be recorded and posted by the end of school day.
Great, thank you. And then a couple more things that we want to share is just some of the things that are happening here at Center of Life. And then we do want to be mindful of our time because we also want to let people here in Hazelwood know that HI is doing their Gladstone update here virtually at 6. So if you registered for that, you can also go to their website, or Tiffany does a great job updating their Facebook page with those information. So some things that are going on here at Center of Life. So we wanted to share, I'll go ahead and have Davonne share this information about some things for our high schoolers, and then also some job positions that we're hiring for. Davonne, just 1 second. I think you're muted. Yeah.
For our high schoolers, as Kiyomi stated, some things that Center of Life has that they're offering them is photography and writing internships. It's a paid opportunity. You can earn up to 5,000. No photography experience or equipment required. Be paired with a professional photographer or writer. explore social, racial, and wealth inequalities through photography or writing, seeking an individual that is committed and passionate about Hazelwood, that wants to be a voice for change.
Yeah, and for that, if you are interested, you can see, you would just follow us on Facebook. You can find this post on our Facebook page, but you'll just reach out to our program director, Joy Cannon, and that's her information over here to the right.
Mhm.
And then here is a job posting centered around education.
We're now hiring, pay rate starting at $18 an hour, hours to be determined approximately 8 to 4. For qualifications, at least 2 years of experience working hands on in a formal educational environment, an associate's degree in the field of education or bachelor's degree. We are looking for education support associates to join our team. These individuals will work on site with students in grades K through 8 to support them in their remote learning, assist them in completing schoolwork, and lead enrichment activities throughout the day. Interested applicants can contact Sarah Crawshaw at Crawshaw, at centeroflife.net. And you can see all the information on our page.
And then we also do want to, again, plug the educational needs survey that we've been sharing. You can also find that on our Facebook page. But it just talks about sort of, what's going on in your household with your students. How are you feeling about everything? And how can we best support you during this time? So we will also make sure to reshare that link once we post this to our Facebook page and there on the YouTube information. Devon, is there anything else that you would like to share before we click over to the webinar?
Also, with the survey, if you are a part of any of the parents or guardians who are a part of Center of Life's Remind group, that survey was sent to you through a text message. Just click the link in the text message, it'll take you right to the survey.
Thank you. Okay. So again, we just want to give credit where it's due. So this was a webinar that I had attended through an organization called Parent Spring. So you can find them at parentspring.com. And so they do have a subscription if that's something that you're interested in, but they just post a lot of different webinars and informational things for parents and caregivers, especially around everything that's happening right now. So this one is called Back to School, but Still at Work, Finding Balance as a Parent. So we thought that that would be a very pertinent thing to share right now as we, get ready to go back into school, and we're just, very overwhelmed, and the last couple of months have been certainly super overwhelming. So I did cut it down by a few minutes, and we are going to stop it a little bit short before they talk about themselves as an organization, just because we're pressed for time, and we do want to, let people be able to attend that HI meeting if you are watching live. But if you do want to jump off to be able to attend the HI meeting, don't worry, you can come back and view this YouTube video later. And then also I have shared the link about how to access this webinar in full. And then that way you can learn a little bit more about this organization and be able to watch the whole thing. The beginning of it actually starts with this nice little meditation piece, just a lot of deep and intentional breathing and things to just sort of recenter ourselves. So that's a nice thing to be able to do. But yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and play this, and then we'll just let that go.
All right, so let's get started. Back to school, but still at work, finding balance as a parent. So you all have already met me and Sam. Let's get a look from 30,000 feet, what we're gonna be going over today. So we talked about who we are, and first we wanna spend just a couple minutes thinking about who you are. Everybody's in a different situation. I think it's good for us to mention just how varied our experiences are as we come to this goal of finding balance from different parts of the country, different family situations, different work situations. But where we're really going to spend the majority of our time today is on focusing on principles and strategies. So big ideas to help us orient ourselves to the problems and challenges that we're facing as parents, as working parents, and also specific tips, tactics, and strategies that we can put into play right away. And then by the end, Sam will spend a few minutes telling you a little bit about our Parent Spring community for those who are interested. So first and foremost, who you are. One of the things that stood out just so clearly to us last week on our monthly call with our Parent Spring membership was just how diverse people's experiences are. I mean, it's fair to say that most parents are feeling pretty stressed right now, whether your kids have started school or they're just about to start school, whether your kids are in a pod or the school district's doing a hybrid model, or your kids are going to school. Like I'm pretty sure some of the kids in the southern states are actually going to school now. Or if you're in a situation like me and Sam, where our school districts are starting off with distance learning, you may be a single parent, you may be married, you may have high support family to help with the caregiving stuff, low support. You may be working at home, or you may be an essential worker. You may be employed or outside of the home, or you may be a stay-at-home parent. Everybody's in different circumstances. So what we wanted to do, starting off with these principles that I'm going to show you now, these 5 principles, we wanted to really cast a wide net so that we have something valuable for everybody. But we also know through our experience that if we try and do things too generally, then it's not really that actionable for anybody. So we're going to go into each of these principles in detail, knowing that because of the varied experiences, the varied situations that every family is in, some of this stuff is going to apply to you more than others. So let's look at this: collaboration, self-care, consistency, flexibility, and essentialism. We'll take each of these in turn. So first up is collaboration. And this is not going to be possible for everybody, but the general recommendation is if it is possible, don't do this alone. Try and find your teammates. And your teammates may be your spouse, they may be your ex-spouse, or they may be your mother or your uncle or your cousin or anybody else who helps you take care of your kids. And we'll even talk in just a minute about how to think even more broadly than that. The idea here is to share some of the burden, share some of the load. And maybe you already had some practice with this in the spring when the stuff hit the fan and then everybody went into a scramble mode to help get our kids through the spring semester. But this is a great time now, even if you've already started school, to come back and think about, okay, who is on my team? Who can I count on? Even if it's not a 50-50 balance, who can I count on a little bit to help with some of these things? And so one of the first things you want to talk about with your collaborators, with your teammates, is what are your goals for this period? And you can think about goals for just the next 2 weeks or the next month, because that's when we're going to see probably some of the greatest fluctuations, some of the greatest uncertainty, and unfortunately, some of the greatest chaos as our kids go back to school. Or you can think about it a little bit further out, like what are our goals? What are our family goals for the semester even? I wouldn't recommend going too far ahead of that, just because what I'm anticipating is going to be a fair amount of unpredictability. And so it's hard to plan and really set realistic goals that far out. But of course, you'll make the best decision for your family. So your goal might be something kind of realistic, like, okay, our goal as a family is to just get through this as unscathed as possible. Or if you do have a lot of support, you're just solidly employed, and you have a number of advantages moving forward, maybe your goals, you want to set your goals a little bit higher, like something like our family, myself as a parent, and then my children, our expectation or goal is that everybody puts forth the same effort that we had pre-pandemic, just depending on what works for your family. And then the next thing you want to get on the same page about with your teammates is what are the responsibilities? So who's responsible for what? So for example, if one parent is handling most of the academic related stuff for the kids, which of course is more now in general, no matter what, whether if you're doing micro schooling or your kids are even on site, you generally have more responsibilities, more educational responsibilities as a parent. So if one parent's taking over that stuff, maybe the other parent slides in and takes over more of the household chores, for example. And then the last thing that's really helpful to get on the same page about is logistics. So this might be a weekly family meeting or a weekly team meeting where you talk about, okay, well, who's going to do what and what's actually on the calendar? What are the things that we need to anticipate? And again, you can look at this on a continuum. You can be very detailed and organized about it, or you can be a little bit looser, depending on what works best for you and your team. And one thing that's always helpful, and there's just so much research on goal setting and attainment and organization in the psychology literature that shows that when we write these things down, even if they're simple things, it doesn't have to be a contract, a multi-page contract, but just when we write down what our intentions are, when we write down what our plan is, it just makes it so much more likely that we'll actually be able to attain it and to reach it, to follow through with what our actual hopes are. And now speaking more broadly about our team, it can be really helpful for those of you all who have older kids, teenagers, or even young adults, because so many young adults are in the home now. If they have flexibility, availability, and the right temperament, you may delegate some of the responsibilities to your older kids. And I think the important distinction there is if you're asking kids, if you're asking your older children to take on some of these responsibilities, it's really helpful if you're not asking them to take on emotional responsibilities. If you're asking them to take on some instrumental things like washing dishes or making food, or sometimes even maybe providing some tutoring for your younger children, that can be really helpful too. So delegation can be a part of your plan for finding balance. Let's look at some more collaboration strategies. Again, broadening our view, our image of what our team could look like and how loose or tight we arrange that team, the team. So first and foremost, thinking about communicating with the teacher. So as I'm gearing up to meet my son's teacher in elementary school and my daughter's several teachers in middle school, I'm thinking about preparing an email and to establish that line of communication, to first and foremost find out, okay, how does the teacher like to communicate? Obviously, now that so many of us are at a distance and can't go to the school or can't go into the classroom, we can't have those face-to-face conversations. So it kind of restricts our communication and our ability to put our best foot forward. So we just have to be probably a little bit more thoughtful about how we're engaging, especially if we're engaging with teachers through the written word, where it's so hard to understand tone and context and things like that. So starting off by asking the teacher, okay, how would you like me to reach out to you in the event that I need to communicate with you in the near future, which for most of us will be true. We probably will have questions. And so as we're doing that, having just a generally respectful approach to the teacher, and a lot of this stuff is basic, but as we're all stressed, more than usual, we're more anxious, we're sort of swimming in the uncertainty. It's just normal for us to be a little shorter, to be a little more curt, and maybe not attend to some of our typical niceties and politeness that go a long way in establishing positive relationships with people we don't know, like our kids' teachers. So appreciating that they're in a tough situation too, and like us as parents, they're doing things that they've never had to do before. Most don't have the training to do this. So just showing that gratitude for where they're at and the efforts they're putting forward can go a long way in inviting them in, however informally, into your team. And so if your district doesn't really have things together yet, I know that my kid's school district just sent out a copy of the schedule, the class schedule for the week, which is, a big relief for me, because now I can put that into our family calendar and I can work around that and schedule things appropriately. But if your school district doesn't have it together, then most likely the teacher will be the person that you'd want to reach out to find out what's actually happening. And then of course, at a minimum, you want to have a sense, ask the teacher what all about the assignments, homework, grading policies, how are the assignments organized? Are you all entering into a phase, another phase in our school district? The grades were essentially pass-fail for the spring. So asking, are they going to be graded as normal, or is it going to be pass-fail? How and when are assignments turned in? And essentially, how long do kids have to do these assignments? Knowing all those things beforehand will help you be a good advocate and educator for your child. So now let's return to the theme of self-care. I wanted to put this first because Sam and I, as you said, we put self-care front and center generally. We know it's so important, and so much of what we do is showing parents how to accurately and efficiently put forth this effort to help their kids in various ways, but that always requires more energy. So we have to counterbalance that with self-care, because that's what gives us the emotional energy. So in Parent Spring, we integrate, just like what we did with Sam a little while ago, we integrate that into all of our meetings, and we try to integrate that into our online courses as well, just so that we're always getting that, as the definition here says, we're always getting that nurturance, we're always getting that recharge of energy. And for some people in some practices, they also get that connection to their deeper self or higher power. So there's a lot of different ways to think about self-care. What I like to do, I kind of like to group the activities into these 4 categories generally: spiritual, relational, emotional, and physical. So examples of spiritual self-care might be things like reading philosophical or spiritual texts. It might be praying. It might be meditating even. Relational self-care is sort of taking care of ourselves in relationships. So 2 examples are setting boundaries, appropriate boundaries, even with our loved ones, sometimes especially with our loved ones, and also practicing assertiveness, really ensuring that we're getting our needs met in relationships as well. And then an example of emotional self-care, this is the kind of stuff that happens between our ears. There's so many opportunities right now because there's so much demand on our time and our energy. There are many opportunities for us to feel like we're failing and for us to kind of be unfair to ourselves. And I'll touch on this again in a later slide. But in emotional self-care, there would be practicing some self-acceptance, however we're showing up, however we're performing, practicing self-compassion, and those sorts of things go a long way to help our just experience of ourselves in our own consciousness, in our own body, to be more positive, in spite of the fact that we're up against these dramatic or these really big challenges right now. And then the physical self-care is pretty straightforward. The big 3 is exercise, food, and sleep. So self-care, one of the things that Sam and I have learned, both through our therapeutic work, but also with Parent Spring, is that self-care is kind of a new idea. It's a new concept for people. And so it's helpful to have metaphors, ways to make these kinds of things stick in our minds so that they grow in priority. And for the people who have heard about self-care, the most common model for that, or common metaphor, is the oxygen mask. And so basically, it comes from aviation. So if you're in a plane and the cabin pressure drops, the recommendation is that the parents first put the mask on themselves before you tend to the child. And that's a matter of safety. That is the best way to protect both you and your child. And so what that means in practice is that we're scheduling, we are making time for ourselves. We are saying, okay, I'm taking a break from you. I'm going to go work out, or I'm going to go journal, or I'm going to go on a walk with a friend, physically distanced walk with a friend. And that's sort of, in a way, putting ourselves first as parents. And I really love this model because it's immersive. It really lets us sink into our own experience. And it can be really hard, especially if you have young kids, to do things like meditate with your kids there. Although, like Sam said, you can, with practice, teach them to do it. But there is a limitation to this model of the oxygen mask. So another one that I came up with, which is kind of complementary, I call it the jogging stroller. And the jogging stroller, we all know what that is. As I was driving to the office today, I saw a dad driving his little, or running with the stroller with his little baby in it. And so that's a kind of concurrent self-care. That's when we are taking care of ourselves. We're doing something positive and nourishing for ourselves while we're also caring for our kids. And there are many different examples of this, and we can even fit them into those 4 types of self-care. But, obviously going on a run or going on a walk with our baby makes sense. But we can go on a walk with our teenager too. We can go on a drive. If we need a break, we can have our teenager come along. We can play music in the car. There's all sorts of different simple ways that may be more accessible now to do this kind of concurrent self-care with a family member or with somebody else. It may be more accessible right now than the oxygen mask examples, because we are spending so much time with our families and we have so little opportunity to actually step away. So let's talk again about some of the foundational self-care strategies. What we're all moving towards in this presentation, we're thinking about, okay, how do we get to a sense of balance? How do we arrive at that? And one of the main pathways that Sam and I talk about, just as a general positive thing for us, if we're looking for happiness, if we're looking for balance, or whatever else our goal is, if we're able to develop resilience or adaptability, then it's so helpful to us in all of those endeavors. And so one way of thinking about it is like this. I call this REFs, relationships, exercise, food, and sleep. That these are kind of foundational self-care strategies. So everybody knows, as we mentioned before, exercise, food, and sleep. Many of which, especially sleep, I think is being challenged during this time. But I also think about us being social animals. We really need to maintain our connections. And yes, it's so much harder than it used to be. But if we think about having those calls, having those socially distanced walked or meetups in a park with the people we love and who we support and who support us, that this is really the foundation of moving towards that model or that experience of resilience and adaptability. And if we can stack on top of that simple things, like even what Sam did with us, what Sam guided us in a few minutes ago, these little 1-2 minute practices, it doesn't always have to be meditating or breathing. It can be jotting down little notes to yourself. It can be doing any number of creative expression type exercises just for brief periods. These are all what I call individualized self-care activities. And so these are going to be very specific to you. And when we put those things together, again, thinking about probably shrinking how long we're able to engage in these things for right now, for this period where we have so many responsibilities. The idea is that will help us arrive at not necessarily a permanent state of resilience, but it'll give us some experience of it so that we can continually reach for that resilience and adaptability as things continue to change, as the ground continues to move underneath our feet. Now I want to jump into consistency. So this was another one that I thought was so important, and I was like, this one needs to be first, because consistency is so good at creating safety, especially for young children, and it helps relieve us once we have a sort of daily and weekly rhythm. But again, the teamwork and the self-care I put as priorities first, but they work well together, of course, with this idea of consistency. And one thing that's happening now, no matter what situation you're in, kids and families have fewer educational supports than they used to. So our kids have also fewer associations and environmental cues for learning. So if we think about what typically happens for a kid, let's imagine a kid in elementary school. When they wake up, they have a sequence. They wake up in the morning, they have a sequence of events and activities and environments that they engage in, all of which are associated in their mind with learning. And so when a kid goes to the breakfast table, when they get dressed, when they get on the bus or get in the car to go to school, and they line up and they step into that environment with all of the educational materials around, seeing their friends, teacher, all of those things are just layers and sequences of associations with learning. And so many of those to so many of our kids are lost right now. So we have to actually do things to try, acknowledging that we can't do it completely or perfectly. We have to do some things to try and build up some new associations for learnings to help our kids feel a little bit more engaged, knowing that even though our kids will often do homework in the home, our homes are usually associated with like fun and relaxation and entertainment, as opposed to more intensive or extensive studying. So I'm sort of repeating myself here, but I think it's worth repeating, is that consistency really helps create a sense of emotional safety. And when children feel that sense of safety, when they feel that their life rhythms are predictable, that helps them develop resilience and adaptability as well. And so one of the fundamental things that we can do as parents, and I'm sure many of you have done this already, this is how most of us, not all of us, but most of us organize our lives, is to create a visual schedule. And what I do personally is I use my computer and my phone with Google Calendars, but I also, and my wife is really good at this, creating visual schedules so that we're all on the same page and so that the kids can see what the expectations are as well. And I want to talk just very briefly about how those visual schedules might look depending on your situation. So for folks who are still connected to a school district and have a kind of schedule, the most common thing is a detailed schedule. So we all know what it looks like. You know, we all have calendars and some people use paper planners, but you can use your phone for that as well. And it's where things are segmented, right, by, you know, whatever unit of time you want, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, but you have kind of a detailed plan. And some people like that, having that kind of detailed certainty can go a long way in helping us actually do the work that we need to do and feel okay about it. But it's not going to work for everybody. And one of the things that Sam and I both did with our families in the spring, when really more of the education, we were responsible for more of the education than maybe we might be this semester, is we used what's called a block schedule. And so it's a little bit less rigid than a detailed schedule. So you can make, 2 or 3 or 4 blocks. And if there's no specific time requirements for your school, or if you have, if you're designing a pod for your kids that's, or a mini school or micro school that's not specifically connected to a school district, you can experiment with a block schedule where, a block may last 2 hours and you just have a certain number of tasks to get through in those couple of hours. But you don't have to segment it and you don't have to micromanage it. And then related, really, this isn't necessarily a separate type of schedule, but it's more a feature that you can use with either a detailed or a block schedule. And that's kind of an extended schedule. So if, like many parents, you're in a situation where you have to be there with your kids, if your kid has special needs and you need to be physically present with them while they're on the Zoom call, or you just have young kids and they just won't stay there without you, then and if you're fortunate enough to have the flexibility with your work, you may have to spend the first several hours of the day sitting with your kid, helping them with their work, helping them stay engaged. And if you have that flexibility, then you can choose a block of time later in the day naturally to do some of your work. And by no means is what I'm talking about easy. I'm just thinking about ways of organizing this, knowing that for many of us, this is essentially like adding a second job, and adding a second job that we weren't trained for. So Sam sent out a worksheet and as well as notes. I believe, Sam, you're saying you sent them out today. You don't have to be looking at them now, but I wanted to mention it because as psychologists, we're always interested in helping all of these concepts or some of these concepts stick. We know that a worksheet and actively engaging with what you're learning can be helpful. And you can certainly do that afterwards. And so if people are watching this as a recording, this will be both of those, the notes and the worksheet will be in the email that goes out after this recording is done. And so there's some more options for these consistency strategies on the worksheets. So first and foremost, like we talked about before with those learning associations not necessarily being in place in the home, helping to create work and play spaces. It doesn't matter if the school started already. If you haven't done this, you can still, of course, go back and redo this. So some of the decisions you, of course, would want to make are where can you and your kids work in the same room? Do you have, like I mentioned earlier, do you have a teenager who wants to work in their own room? Because this is some of the environmental things that are going to create these associations and cues to ready the child to learn. And so things like, making sure there's a desk or a table, that there's supplies, that there's, stuffed animals, there's things that are there to be comfortable but not distracting. Those are going to be things to help your child put his or her best foot forward. And then another thing to think about is, what are the play spaces? So for if you have a toddler or a preschooler, it could be nice, it could be helpful to set up little stations in the home, because this is sort of what they do in preschool. Not always, but it's definitely part of the Montessori experience and a lot of play-based preschool programs. Having little stations if possible. And at the very least, my recommendation is having a difference between your workspace and your play space, because as we'll talk about soon, we want our kids to be able to get out of the work mode, to get out of the study mode, and we want that for ourselves too. We want to be able to step onto the porch if we have one, or get outdoors, or go to another area in the home where we can step away from it and get some of that relaxation to build up that energy again to go back to work. Now, I want to say, just zooming out for just a minute, that there's a lot of ideas here and on the worksheet, and we're not expecting you to do all of them. Really, Sam and I, we don't do all of these. We do the ones that work for our family. And so something like making a meal plan may feel like that's a little bit overkill for me, but just let's talk about just a couple of ideas there. When we think about our kids and ourselves moving through the day, and this is something I discovered personally in the spring, is that if I'm more in charge of the kids' meals, of more of the meals, if my kids are not eating school lunch anymore, then I have to do something about lunch. And so having some sort of plan, some sort of preparation to make the lunch, the breakfast, dinner process a little bit more fluid, maybe a little more organized, can be helpful in actually getting them back to the schoolwork after lunch, if that's what fits your family. And other things too, just to help their workflows, making sure that you regularly have snacks to just kind of keep their energy and attention going throughout the day, especially in these early weeks, which will certainly be the biggest adjustment for us and for our kids as well. And one thing that I talk about in I think at least 2 of the online courses that I've made for our membership is the importance of of having fun rituals, or I call them mini celebrations. You know, kids actually get it. This is another thing that our kids get at school. They get, you know, pizza or popcorn parties when the kids do well for an extended period of time. They have birthday celebrations, and these are all the kinds of things that are lost when our kids are not in the classroom, when they're not sharing food, when they can't be close together. Even kids who are going back to school probably can't do many of these things because of the physical distancing requirements. And so integrating some of these into our daily and weekly rhythm as a family can be really helpful. And one of the things, again, from my own experience, in my family before the pandemic, just kind of coincidentally, we started a family tradition of Friday night movie nights. And we continued it through the pandemic. And it's just one of those things that kind of anchors us. It gives us a sense of, you know, I know one of the common complaints and experiences that people have had since it started is that everything just blends together. Every day feels the same. And for us as a family, even though it's only once per week, this family ritual of doing movie nights together is something that gives us something to look forward to. It gives us a sort of rhythm and collective joy. You know, it's one of those simple things that helps us make us feel like, okay, we're still a family, we're still in this together, and we still can create some joy, even if it's not something that dominates our consciousness or experience. And then, so we're talking about consistency, talking about the value of schedule, talking about the value of organization, but the truth is that doesn't work for all of us. And so it can be helpful to think about, okay, what's the bare minimum that I need right now in order for us to feel a sense of sanity, and in order for us as a family to move more towards that balanced state. And one of the things, the bare minimum, I think, is having ending times both for work and school. And you can use this flexibly. You can use this as it suits your family. So even if you don't have a consistent schedule that you follow, you definitely want to have end times. And it could be no homework, no work after 5 o'clock. You could be super rigid about it so that you can preserve that family time from dinner onward. Or it may be you stop right before dinner. It could be that you stop an hour before bedtime, depending on your family's needs. And this is helpful for us too, because we all, no matter how much effort and energy we're putting in now, we still, all need breaks at some point. And we'll talk more about that soon. So again, we talked about consistency. We talked about organization. We talked about really finding those consistent rhythms. But now I'm going to say something that may feel a little contradictory. I tend to think of it more as paradoxical, meaning both things can be true, even though they look opposite. And one of the things that we're encouraging people to do, parents to do, is to really embody and practice flexibility. So author Judson Moore has a little quote about this. A bad plan is better than no plan. And the most important quality of any plan is the flexibility to change. It's hard to say what's coming, but what I think is going to be happening for most of us is that in the coming weeks and months, we're going to see some change. So for families that have kids going to school right now, it could be that the virus has such a reach or such an increase that our kids are going to have to come home and go into distance learning, which will be, a dramatic upheaval in most situations. It could be that my and Sam kids are, fingers crossed, the virus abates a little bit, and then they can actually start to go to school sooner rather than later, maybe doing experimenting with a hybrid model. But I am expecting that things will change, and so it's really helpful if we can cultivate that willingness to adapt. And one of the things that's helpful, again, coming back to what happens in our own minds, what happens between our ears and in our hearts, it's really helpful if we can acknowledge what's within our control and what's not. And I think one of the things that has become really clear and really obvious with the changes with the changes in work and school is that there's actually quite a bit that we're not in control of. There's quite a few other adults and systems that we depend on for us to lead the lives that we want to live. And I think generally speaking, what we can control is really, many of us are reassessing and realizing a lot of what we control is limited to the walls of our home. And thinking about it on another level, it's even more limited in some respects. It's limited to the boundaries of our minds, of our brains, of our bodies. And so thinking about in dedicating more energy to the things that we can control than the things we can't can be really helpful in cultivating that flexibility and the capacity to be nimble and adapt to the changes that will likely come, in particular in the first few weeks of this semester. And the way that I think about that primarily is that this is kind of an experiment that we're all participating in. Yes, we have knowledgeable people. We have knowledgeable people in teachers and administrators, ideally, and our employers too, and ourselves. We all have life experience and we all have intelligence to bring to bear in this situation, but none of us are really experts at what's happening now. The truth is we are in a giant experiment. And the more that we can think about it that way and accept that we're in an experiment and that we're putting forth our best effort, our best energy to have this experiment work well, that will give us a stronger capacity to sort of move and shake and adapt to the changes that are to come. So let's talk about specifically about a few flexibility strategies. And again, when you look at this later, you can look at it now if you want, but when you look at the worksheet, you'll see some of these examples. And this one right here is probably my favorite part of all of the slides here. This is what I mean by scripts. I mean the automatic thoughts that we have, the things that we tell ourselves, in particular when we're feeling stress. And stress being heightened for so many of us right now, it's quite possible that some of those automatic thoughts that we're having are turning more negative because we're in a situation now where it would just be normal for us to feel like we're failing a little bit more, or we're not quite meeting our own expectations for educating our kids, for doing good jobs at work. And so one of the things that will help us be flexible is to think about and reflect on, to the extent that we have time, those moments when we're having those automatic negative thoughts. And this comes from something called cognitive behavioral therapy. The whole practice is just noticing, or it starts with noticing when those things come up, when we're judging ourselves, when we're criticizing ourselves, when we're not offering ourselves compassion because we haven't met our own expectations or others' expectations too. And so what we can do is be aware of them and eventually either be curious about those scripts that come up, the things we tell ourselves, or to actually even challenge some of those and think about replacing some of those negative automatic thoughts with something that's more fair to us, something that's maybe even more positive and realistic in the context of this pandemic. Another thing to be flexible with are screens. And I think probably in most households, kids are using screens more. Understandably, they have less entertainment, they have less interaction and connection with their peers. And we also have to do work, so we can use screens. As parents, we can use the screens to help entertain our kids when we need to go all into our work. And so I think it's understandable if kids are using screens more now. And it's also understandable if parents are a little bit worried about that now. And really the barometer for me right now is your child's screen use interfering with their sleep? And is it interfering with their relationships? If the answer is yes, then you may want to think about putting some more limits around it. If the answer is no, then you might think about how you can use screens, whether it be video games or Netflix, YouTube videos for your kids, whatever it might be, how you can use that as actually a parenting tool. And so again, it helps if you had or have some limits around it, then you can use screens as when you need breaks or as rewards for your child performing certain behaviors. But in general, the American Academy of Pediatrics, they had screen recommendations before the pandemic. Right now, they've loosened them because they know like me and Sam, we think about screens holistically. And so if your kid's getting more screen time, it may not necessarily be a bad thing. I think particularly with tweens and teens who are using the screens to stay in contact with their friends a lot through social media. So thinking about how you can be flexible with screens, mobile devices, iPads, tablets, computers to benefit your work process, but also to help your kids sometimes stay connected to their friends. And then this is what I call a homework pass. And a homework pass can be used flexibly. And I'm literally talking about cutting out a sheet of paper, calling it a homework pass, and you can print or write several of these. And the homework pass, again, is something to you that you can use flexibly. On one end of the continuum, you can say, okay, this homework pass, again, it's a parental tool. If you're stressed as a parent, you've been working through hours trying to help your kid, you've got work deadlines to meet, and you just don't have it in you in that moment to help your kid through this tough math or this tough essay, then you might consider using a homework pass. And it's basically, like a hall pass. It's an excuse. You can use it to fully give them immunity, fully give them a pass on the assignment such that they would even get a 0 if they didn't turn it in. Or you can be a little bit more sort of realistic and moderate about it at the other end and just say, okay, here's a homework pass. I know you're usually supposed to do it at this hour or this afternoon. Here's a little break, a temporary break from it, so that the child doesn't actually get a 0 or an incomplete assignment and sink their grade, but that they get a little bit of a break from it and you get a little break from it too. So again, using that flexibly as a parental tool primarily. And speaking of breaks, this is a time for sure, again, especially this first month of school, maybe even extending to the first semester, is using planned breaks and unplanned breaks liberally. These are the things, and if this is true for all kids, but think about kids with special needs, kids with ADHD, they in particular really need these kinds of breaks to sort of regulate their emotions, regulate their thoughts to be able to come back. And so it may look like spotty participation in some of the first few weeks, depending on your kid and situation. But of course, you will know best what's flexible and what's too much, what's permissive. But having that mentality that maybe early on, my flexibility as a parent with respect to breaks can really embolden my kid and help guide them into performing a little bit better. And the same goes for us too at work. And then the idea of playing catch up. This is sort of the adult equivalent of the homework pass. So I'm not talking about don't do your work. I'm talking about looking for ways to work flexibly. So like I spoke earlier about this extended schedule or having an extended block. It may be that, your best time to work or your most focused time to work is like 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Or what I do sometimes, if I have to invest a lot of time and energy into my kids' learning, is I'll do a little bit of work on weekends. And, I'm lucky because I have that flexibility. That's not going to work for everybody. But stealing a few hours on weekend mornings or in the evenings can be really helpful to strengthen our adaptability and still meet some of our work in school requirements. And so this one is a little bit more philosophical, the idea of essentialism, but still important. This is going to help us sort of take a step back and really think about and reflect on what does this time period mean for our family? What do we want it to mean for our family? And this self-help guru and author Gretchen Rubin, she writes, in many situations, we don't need to make a perfect choice, but just a good enough choice. And these questions are actually on the worksheet. Again, you don't need to look at it necessarily right now, but it's good to think about them briefly. So what is most important to you and your family right now? Again, looking at this from a distance, at some point, we will be past this period. And of course, some people have said, well, maybe coronavirus will become a regular part of our lives, but most people have the realistic hope that things will be improved in the future, hopefully not too distant future. And so assuming that we all make it to that point, what is really your family priorities? What do you want to take from this? What's the most important? One of the things that has kind of surprised me, but has just been something that I'm so grateful for, is that my kids, since this pandemic, they were like, almost everybody else's kids, where they fight sometimes and they get along sometimes. But since the pandemic, one shift that's happened in their relationship is that they really seek each other out for entertainment. So what that means is they spend longer talking to each other. They spend longer playing with each other. Of course, they still get into fights and have conflict and have tension, but it's it's odd to say it this way, but one of the strange gifts of this pandemic for my family is that sense of togetherness in my children. And that's really helped shape how I think about this, and that, these are the real core values for my family. And of course, yours may be different, but it is helpful to think about, okay, what is the most important thing right now? And another way of looking at it is, what does the good enough version of your life look like? If you're stuck in a cycle, feeling kind of disappointed with yourself, feeling like, as I said before, like you're not meeting your own expectations or others' expectations, it might be helpful to get together with your teammate, your spouse, your boyfriend or girlfriend, your family members, and think about, what does a good enough version of your life look like right now, in the context of being really asked to do too much by too many people. Going along with that is, what do you need to focus on in order to reach that good enough? And while of course I don't know what you need to focus on specifically, most likely you will need to focus on fewer things. Again, returning to this idea of your core family values. And lastly, one of the things that may be helpful is determining, for now, what might you need to let go of. And because I'm such an inside out kind of thinker and person, is you may need to let go of some of your own expectations of what you want for your performance at work and what you want for your kids' performance at school. Not necessarily, right? It may feel one of the best things for you, maybe the opposite, actually keeping your expectations high. But again, considering, are there any other things that you might need to let go of in order to arrive at that sense of good enough for now? Okay, so we've covered essentialism, flexibility, consistency, self-care, and collaboration. And it's a lot of stuff, right? And so we made a worksheet, we made a little notes document so that this really, as much as possible, gets in your bones, because we know you're going to walk away from this after this call. You're going to go back to your life, and reality will be with you. And it's understandable if a lot of this stuff doesn't carry over. And when Sam and I started this a few months back, started really wanting to share some of these ideas through Parent Spring. Well, we got two things consistently. One is parents really appreciate and resonate with some of the ideas and information that we're sharing. And then invariably, they also want to know, but how do we make this stuff stick? A 1 hour webinar is good, but how do we build it into our lives consistently? And so what we've been working on, Sam and I've been working on the last few months, is our answers to that question. How do we make it stick? And so I'm going to hand it back over to Sam right now, and he's going to tell you about some of the good answers that we've come up with so far. Are you there, Sam?
All right. Yes, I'm here.
All right.
So thank you for that, Mika. That was excellent. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen just real quick, and we're in the home stretch right now, and we'll be out of here in just a minute or two. And I did just put Mika has mentioned Parent Spring a few times, and I did just put a link to that in the chat box, and I'm just going to share my screen here and tell you a little bit about what that is, because the answer to how do I make these skills stick, which is a question we get all the time, right? Like, how do I learn? We none of us get a manual on how to be a parent, which is really tragic in many ways from a cultural standpoint. But the question we get over and over again is like, how do we do this? How do we make this stick? How can I make my parenting sustainable? And one of the best things you can do, and a lot of research has shown this, is surround yourself with people in a community where they do what you want to do, where that's normal. It's the norm to practice and think about parenting. And that's what Parent Spring is. And that's essentially, you know, the organization in the community that Mika and I represent, and that has sponsored this whole webinar today. And what we are is an online community where we have an online video library with a lot of different topics. We actually produce 1 to 2 mini courses, as we call them, per month. So a mini course is an asynchronous online self-paced course that's anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour or 2 hours. And you can see up here that you see on the screen right now, these are some of the topics that we already have there in the library. We launched Parent Spring a couple of months ago, and we already have 7 self-paced courses on there. You know, effective discipline, parental resilience, child and teen anxiety, mindful breathing, sibling contact, screens for teens, spousal connections. We also have a lot of other clips and worksheets and resources up there. But the thing that I think really sets our community apart from other resources is we're not just a kind of asynchronous online self-paced learning library, which that's great and that's good. And we feel very confident in the courses that we create, but we also do a monthly live meeting, kind of like this, but the difference is this is a Zoom webinar where you can see us and we can't see you. In our live meetings, we actually interact live and we talk about all things parenting. Sometimes we take a little bits and pieces in small bites of the courses and bring some of those slides up and go deeper into them. Sometimes we just check in and kind of relate to each other as parents. As Mika said before, one of the things we always do is we practice some form of self-care, so that because we know that at the base of skillful parenting is quality self-care for ourselves, because if we can care for ourselves, then we can better care for our kids, our partners, our families overall. So that's one of the kind of the biggest pulls about that. We also answer questions. I mean, we as parents and as professionals don't have the answers to every single question out there, but our kind of charge, our responsibility as facilitating this community is if we don't know an answer to something, we go out and we research it because we want to kind of continuously contribute to this community in this bank of Q&A basically. And some of the more exciting features that we're going to be bringing over time is having online forums so that you can connect with each other online in our membership dashboard, even in between our live calls. And what we really kind of think about the most is the concept of spiral learning, which is spiral learning is essentially like you come back to the same thing over and over again and spiral upwards, meaning your understanding and your skill level evolves and gets better. So for example, setting boundaries or setting discipline with your kids, or learning how to set boundaries around screen times. That was a popular thing that came up in the chat as Mika was talking about setting limits for it or not setting limits with screens, right? Like you come back to that over and over again. You get some support or some ideas from Parent Spring. You go back, you try it, you fail a little bit, you troubleshoot, you come back, we talk about it, we process, and then that skill over time evolves. That's really the core of what we're all about.
Okay, so I just wanted to pause the video there and let them speak a little bit about what Parrot Spring is and sort of the activities that they offer. Like I said, they have a subscription-based resource, so we will share, since we had this watch party with their webinar on that good information, how to get to their website, and if you're interested in those resources. But also keep in mind there's a lot of free resources here in the community that we share at Center of Life that a lot of different organizations are also sharing. So that's just one of many that you can utilize, whatever works for you, because it's different for everybody, right? And just we want to take this time to keep in mind and let you know that you are doing the best that you can. So just make sure to always keep that in mind and give yourself a pat on the back, even when it feels hard, you're doing the best that you can. So thank you so much for joining us. Do keep in mind that if you wanted to join the HI meeting, it is happening right now about the Gladstone meeting. Davonne, is there anything else that you would like to add or end on?
Just thank anyone who's joining. And of course, like Kiyomi said, if there's any questions or resources that you may need, you can get in contact with the both of us. And that's it.
Yeah, so just to sort of verbally say our information, but we'll post it too. So my email is my first name. It's Kiyomi, Kiyyomi, and then a period, and then Knox, Knox, at centeroflife.net. And then my work phone number that you can reach me at is 412-294-8688.
And for me, it's Davonne, my first name, D as in David, AVONNE, period, Fuller, F as in Frank, ULLER, at centeroflife.net. And my work number is 412-407-5899.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. If you had the chance to peep onto YouTube, so we will share this on our Facebook page as well. And like we said, please feel free to reach out to us with anything. If we don't have the answer, we will certainly try to connect you with someone that does. So thank you all so much for your time. We're going to go ahead and end for tonight.
Thank you.